Hello and welcome to QuipScope. It's a show where we talk about a brand new game or a game that's coming out, maybe a game that's not even come out yet. My name's Ashton.
My name's James.
Hey James.
Perfect.
How are you this morning?
I am good. A little bit croaky. How are you?
I'm okay. But what have you been playing this weekend?
What me been playing? Been playing a bit of Triangle Strategy.
Oh yeah.
Whoa, the best name, the best title. I feel like they came up with a working title and then they forgot to replace it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. I kind of thought, like, someone mentioned the other day and I kind of hadn't put two and two together that was the game that they were talking about. I thought they were just being like, oh, the Triangle Strategy, that's when there's lots of games that are coming out and you need to play all of them at the same time. And then I realised, no, it's not.
Just, Charlie with the whiteboard. Me, like, okay, this is how we're going to tackle February/March.
Yeah, exactly. So you've torn yourself away from Elden Ring.
Yes.
For a couple of hours to give Triangle Strategy a go. What do you think? Is it turn-based?
So
RPG?
yeah, so basically it's a turn-based tactical RPG. It's very big Fire Emblem sort of vibes, but in terms of like aesthetics and stuff, very reminiscent of like Octopath Traveler and sort of retro, like HD 2D. I think is the term that they try and use there. Yeah. But yeah, it's certainly interesting, but it didn't grab me that much, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. But basically, it's very heavy on story as well, right? And that's part of the reason. But it's as I say, quite similar to like Fire Emblem. In that the actual combat, or XCOM, Banner Saga, anything with like grids and you got to move them around on different squares. The actual different, like it's easiest just to like compare it to Fire Emblem, I guess, and say like the things it's slightly different from that. So there isn't any permadeath, but you do have like a lot of different characters. You sort of like taking turns to just attack the enemy, sort of positioning, and positioning is like quite an important thing with that sort of gameplay as well. So they've made a big deal of like making a choice, say after you make a turn, to actually position like show which of the four sides like you want your character to face, because they can get backstabbed, and if there's like flanking as well, like either side, then that causes more damage. So it's that, as well as like a lot of different abilities with different characters. Really mixes stuff up. It, as I say, the game looks quite nice in that sort of old school sort of like retro throwback thing. Yeah. I almost kind of missed the Fire Emblem aspect of, because in Fire Emblem you'd have the clashes and there's like a big fancy show of like the fight between the two units. And I was like, I just realised halfway through, I'm like, oh yeah, it doesn't really do that, does it? But I guess that's kind of the point of the aspect. Yeah.
So what is the story of it, if you've figured it out from now?
Yeah, so this is the thing. It feels like a very long burn game. So before I like put any criticisms in, because it has sort of reviewed quite highly, and I think it's one of those where you're gonna need quite a lot of patience to really get into it. Yeah. But basically, the story for the first, I played maybe like 4 hours or so, and it didn't really hook me in that much. And the reason is I only played 2 battles. It took me between the first battle and the second battle. I wanted to get like a bit more footage of that and at least get beyond the tutorial bit. Took close to 2 hours, and between that was just story. So the story itself, to answer your question, so basically it's quite a fantasy, like world politics sort of fair. You've got 3 nations, obviously Triangle Strategy, of course they've got to have 3. But yeah, you've got Glenbrook, like the Kingdom of Glenbrook, which is where your character's from. Aesfrost. Okay,
you
gotta watch out for that. Yeah. Apologies for the pronunciation there. So yeah, that's sort of up north, as you can imagine. And Hyzant, which is kind of portrayed as maybe they're the bad guys, but I feel like it's going to be a bit more nuanced than that. Right, yeah. And basically, it's sort of 30 years on from like a big conflict over salt. People fighting over salt. It's definitely, one for the gamers, the hashtag gamers. Yeah. Salt being thrown everywhere. But it's 30 years after that, it's like an uneasy peace, and then tensions have been slowly rising. But the pacing of it is very slow, and it's very sort of, right, here's a bunch of like history and world building stuff dumped all at once. and a lot of different characters introduced as well. So I should say you play as Serenoa of House Wolffort. So it's like one of the higher ups, like probably the highest house in that sort of kingdom, apart from like the royal family itself. You've got like an arranged marriage with somebody from Asfrost. I'm gonna keep calling it Asfrost.
Yeah,
that's the canon way of saying it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it sort of moves on from there really. So it's certainly something to sort of dig into, but I feel like they didn't have much of a hook at the start because I thought the main character's boring. Like the main two characters, like your arranged marriage, like your fiance, as it were, like bride to be, is quite dull as well. Although she's at the start, at least, caveats there. It's implied that she is part of a, and I forget what it was called, like a race of people with naturally pink hair.
Right.
Okay. So, at least, justifying that classic anime thing for once. That's sort of only just implied at the minute that, maybe some ancestors did some bad stuff. But apart from that, not much going on.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So, in terms of like the actual fights themselves, how do they play out? Do they play out like, is it still enjoyable to do the battles, or is that kind of bogged down by the story a bit? Or?
Well, I'd say, it's brilliant when you actually get to one. Like, it's quite fun. Like, it's fairly standard if anybody's played something like that before. So it's like you have like a move and you have an action, which would be either like attack or use an item. And in terms of like the order, it's not just all of your turn and then all of the enemy's turn. It's sort of mixed in depending on, so kind of like your typical sort of like RPG thing of what's the word? Initiative. There you go.
Right. Okay.
So like initiative, speed, whatever the stat is governing that. But yeah, your order is all sort of mixed up. So you could have like two of your units, and then you see like two of the enemy's units, and some of the abilities are actually quite interesting as well. So like your main character can, he has like one of his abilities is to delay the enemy's turn, like whoever he hits. So that could just push them further down in the queue.
Right, okay, yeah.
Essentially. And that sort of helps in your line of thinking as well. But yeah, again, like it's sort of very early days in terms of the battles themselves. But from what I could tell so far, pretty interesting. You've got upgrades as well. I should say there's free, like there's like a third part of this, of course it comes in freeze, obviously. Triangles. A third part, like to the whole sort of gameplay loop, in that like you've got the combat, you've got the story, you've got like a little bit of exploration, so like a typical 16-bit like RPG exploration. Although you can like move the camera around, it does look very fancy as well, doing that sort of thing. But you can sort of explore around certain areas, but only when it sort of pertains to the story, only when the story tells you to. Yeah. And you can pick up like little hints and things that will pop up later on, no doubt. You also have an armory that you can upgrade your like weapons and whatnot. So yeah, fairly standard stuff for that.
Fair.
Yeah.
So, will you play again?
I mean, I do want to give it a bit more benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Like, I'm saying, it really has done it's not done itself any favors with it being like the first few hours being quite ponderous, and then you've got to learn all these names and all this stuff. Like, usually I don't mind that sort of stuff if there's something else driving it as well. So, for example, like stuff like Mass Effect, where you have the agency to go and find that stuff out on your own, not the fact that you're playing through what essentially feels like a graphic novel half the time. Yeah. But I do want to give it a go. It seems fairly interesting. I just remembered as well. So, in terms of the story, that's something that has actually been like quite praised in other reviews as well. So, while it's a slow start, it might be worth sort of sticking with that. You also have choices, again, in freeze. You have like dialogue choices that pop up fairly regularly that will apparently dictate who, like what sort of characters you can recruit, different story beats, that sort of thing. So I'm guessing there will be like quite some replayability there, which is nice. But,
fair.
Yeah. just get through that early slot. Yes. Ooh.
Well, triangle strategy, more like try and get through the story.
Nice. Nice.
It wasn't my best one.
No, that sounds good. That's good. Yeah.
Do you have one, James?
I thought one last night, but triangle strategy, more like obtuse story.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good.
Also,
like it.
I just thought of another one, like triangle strategy, more like Square Enix business strategy.
Good, cool.
Well, yeah, end on the strongest one.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. If you want to watch the footage that James captured, if you're listening on the podcast feed, head over to the YouTube channel to see the game itself.
Yes.
And in the meantime, we'll see you on Thursday for the podcast.
Stay ass frosty.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.